So let's talk a little bit about autism and AAC. It does appear that manual signing or total communication results in faster and more complete receptive and or expressive vocabulary acquisition than does speech alone. So remember that sign language is an unaided. You kind of can run what you brung kind of thing. It's your hands are there with you. You don't have to remember a picture or a device or things like that. However, not all children with autism perform equally well with regard to manual sign language. The variable that's very important appears to be their motor planning ability. How is their fine motor ability? Remember, we have lots of motor planning issues here. Maybe not in just going to climb up, on top of a table or something like that, but volitional motor planning, and that's what sign language is. There's evidence to suggest that some individuals with ASD have a lot of difficulty with motor coordination. The other thing with AAC and sign language is children with autism do not grow up in a deaf community, so who are they going to speak with? Picture exchange communication system is a visually based exchange system used for request. It uses ABA principles in the beginning discrete trial training to train an exchange of a picture for a desired object or action. One of the real benefits of picture exchange communication is its early training focuses on the child's initiation of communication right from the very beginning. So if done right, that child does not become such a dependent communicator. They are initiating communication. The other thing that's very helpful in using picture exchange communication system is that it really represents the communicative act both physically and visually. So when we think of the communicative act as needing a reason to speak, a request or a protest, needing a form, in this case it would be giving the picture, right? And the picture is helping scaffold the meaning, right? Because it's giving you a picture of what it represents, which is a little easier scaffold than just the written word or the spoken word. And you're actually giving that picture to a real person. So consequently, the child learns that communication involves another person. Remember, in order to communicate, it takes at least two. However, we're going to go through some of the information in the next week about picture exchange communication system, but I really highly recommend that you get information and training about PECS before you implement it, because it is so very important that you do it correctly. I see lots of PECS training going on that is not good. It doesn't go through phase one in the correct manner, and then the child learns something that's not helpful and not useful to them. It's just another layer in their world. So in our continued kind of overview, we're going to now talk about beginning speakers. I always find this lecture kind of hard to give because there's so much to talk about in all of this, but this course is kind of an overview of every part of autism, so I really recommend that you get more information or work with your speech pathologist very closely about the development of communication in children with autism. Most children with autism who are verbal go through a period of echolalia as they move from being nonverbal to being verbal. We used to go, oh my goodness, let's get rid of echolalia, and now we do the happy dance because we really know that that's a positive sign that the person's able to imitate language and that they're on their way to being verbal. So all children do copy sounds and words and eventually phrases and sentences that they hear adults use in specific and repetitive contexts. Even as adults, I will hear in graduate students turns of phrase that I know these two are friends and they both have the same turn of phrase. However, children with autism tend to kind of stay in that repetition part a little bit longer than others, and they tend to acquire language in the whole form rather than learning it in tiny chunks and then putting it together in an analytical way. And because of that, echolalia is quite common. Just like behavior, echolalia has really specific communicative function. And when we're working with a child who is very echolalic, our first step is to determine the functions of their echolalia. It requires that we be really good observers and really understand how they use communicative acts and how they communicate in what context. What we do know is the more functions echolalia serves, the more chance the person has for moving to more spontaneous language. So as the child moves from just using echolalia for requests, do you want cookie, things like that, to protests or even greeting, then that person is getting ready to move on to spontaneous language. Children may go through what it seems like language regression when they move to more spontaneous language. But really what it is going away from that kind of memorized holistic language to more analytic language production. In fact, I have a little 3-year-old right now whose mom said, you know, I'm really seeing this difference between her language. She's having trouble now ordering her words. She gets all the words kind of in there, but they're not in the right order. And I said, that's great. That's really good. That means she's really putting together her own sentences rather than memorizing what someone else said and popping it down in. Rarely, echolalia has no intent or purpose, or may have a very specific non-communicative purpose for that individual. But typically, you'll see a communicative function. There are two types of echolalia, immediate and delayed, and let's talk about those. Immediate echolalia appears to tap into a person's short-term memory for auditory input, and immediate echolalia is defined as the repetition of a word or phrase just spoken by another person. A lot of times when children are just starting to echo, what you'll hear is just the last part of a phrase spoken or sung, things like that. But immediate means immediate. It just follows.